Why is Ridley Scott's Blade Runner called Blade Runner? The novel that it's adapted from, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, never uses that term. In fact, the word blade only comes up once in the entire book. We learn what Blade Runners are in the opening text of the movie, but Harrison Ford's character, Rick Deckard, never uses a blade. His weapon is a gun. So why not gun runner? Where does the blade come from? So this is where it gets interesting. The earliest use of the word Blade Runner comes from a 1974 novel called The Blade Runner by Alan E. Nourse, an interesting, relatively unknown figure in sci-fi. There, it's one word instead of two. Nourse's The Blade Runner is also a sci-fi novel, but the only relation it has to the movie is the title. The book itself is about underground medical services and smuggling. In the context of the book, a Blade Runner is someone that helps procure medical supplies, such as scalpels, hence the blade, for the medical black market. That's because in the book, medical services are free for everyone as long as they get sterilized. The biological imperative being what it is, it's no wonder that a black market that lets people get the care that they need without having to give up ever having children sprouted up. One of the main characters, Billy Gimp, is the titular Blade Runner. He runs medical supplies for Doc, the doctor, who is a legit doctor but also runs a black market medical studio on the side. Billy and Doc need to avoid the Secretary of Health Control, who have implemented the health control laws. The book seems like an interesting read, and it touches on topics that the world has grappled with over the last century. Access to affordable healthcare, eugenics, and the role of government as it pertains to healthcare and privacy. Now, Ridley Scott's movie didn't lift much from the book in terms of plot. That said, if you'll look at the logo for the movie and the cover of the book, there is a striking, if not almost perfect, resemblance. Then, in 1979, along came legendary beat writer William S. Burroughs. Burroughs lived a fascinating, if troubled, life. In 1951, he killed his second wife, Jean Vollmer, in Mexico City, was tried in absentia for manslaughter, and was given a 2-year suspended sentence. Starting in 1953, he began living in different places: the Tangier International Zone in Morocco, Paris, and London. Those 20 years resulted in some of his best-known work: Junkie, Queer, Naked Lunch, Interzone, and more. In 1974, after withdrawing from heroin, he moved to New York City. Sometime before 1977, he had read Nourse's The Blade Runner, and it apparently moved something inside him. Before this, Burroughs had never written anything for movies. But on December 5th, 1976, his assistant, James Grauholtz, wrote to Peter Matson, Burroughs' agent, that Burroughs had, quote, begun to consider a film treatment, end quote, for Nourse's novel. Matson got the rights from Nourse, and Burroughs blasted out a treatment within a few months. Note the word treatment and not script. What Burroughs wrote was more like a novella than anything else. Burroughs and Nourse's approaches to the story are divergent, to say the least. For Burroughs, the first half is backstory for the second half, and the novella contains themes of overpopulation, invasion of privacy, civil war, and class war. In Burroughs' introduction, Billy is having sex with his partner. It was, in a word, unfilmable. Gerholtz describes others as saying it was, quote, a great read, but how to film it? Too expensive and too esoteric, end quote. Instead, it was published as a book with the confusing title Blade Runner, a Movie, while the film rights, which Nourse had also sold to Burroughs, reverted back to him. An interesting coda to this part of the story is that an adaptation did eventually end up happening. It's called Taking Tiger Mountain, and it's loosely based on Burroughs' treatment. The director, Tom Huckabee, paid just $100 for the rights to the treatment, but was obviously unable to use the title as Ridley Scott's Blade Runner came out just the year before. Anyways, the Burroughs treatment then made it into the hands of Hampton Fancher, who wrote the screenplay for Blade Runner with David Peoples. Now, the production of Blade Runner is something that deserves its own video, so we're going to zero in on just a few relevant points here. Fancher optioned Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep in 1977. In 1977, Ridley Scott had just released his first movie, The Duelists, and had begun production on Alien, which would release in 1979 to widespread critical and commercial acclaim. Scott's next project was Dune, which had its own troubled production. Things were moving slow, so he left Dune in favor of Blade Runner, which he had declined once before. On February 21st, 1980, he officially joined the production. When he joined, the movie was going by another title, Dangerous Days. Before that, the working title was the original title of the PKD story. But, as Fancher tells it, one day, when he was pondering a question Scott had posed him on what exactly a Rick Deckard was, he came across the Burroughs novella Blade Runner, a Movie. It hit him then and there. Deckard was a Blade Runner. When they needed to settle on the final title, producer Michael Dealey suggested they go with the obvious and named the movie after what Deckard was. Burroughs, who was a fan of Philip K. Dick, sold the rights to his title to Scott for a nominal fee. Of the title, Scott said, quote, "It was a nice, threatening name that neatly described a violent action," end quote. So, in the end, we have a movie loosely adapted from a novel named after two other works by two distinct authors, one well known, the other not, both of whom rendered the title in different ways, and neither of whom influenced what went into the movie. Ridley Scott's masterwork is now the definitive Blade Runner, overshadowing the little-known treatment by the well-known William S. Burroughs and the little-known book by the underappreciated Alan E. Nourse. So, why is it called Blade Runner? Chance, happenstance, and the fact that it sounds cool.